You have been told by culture, by family, by your own inner voice, that gratitude should be enough. That if your life is safe, if your bills are paid, if your health holds, then wanting more is selfish. That the restlessness you feel at 65 or 70 is something to manage, medicate, or simply ignore until it fades. Everything you have been taught about contentment in the second half of life is wrong. And the proof is simple. You already feel it. That quiet hum beneath the surface of your days. That sense that something inside you is pressing against walls you built yourself. You are not ungrateful. You are not broken. You are not having a crisis. What is happening to you has a name. He called it the most important transition a human being can make. And almost no one talks about what it actually looks like when it arrives. This is not a video about finding a hobby or staying busy. This is about what happens when your soul outgrows the container you spent decades building for it. And the 6 ways that growth announces itself before your mind has any language for it at all. There is a particular kind of discomfort that has no obvious cause. It does not arrive with drama. There is no argument, no loss, no catastrophe to point to. Your life looks the same as it did last year. The furniture is in the same place. The people around you are the same people, but something has shifted underground. And because nothing external has changed, you assume the problem must be you. You must be ungrateful. You must be depressed. You must be difficult. Jung had a different explanation. He observed that the human psyche does not stop developing at 40 or 50. It continues to grow, relentlessly, silently, even when the life surrounding it remains fixed. And when the inner self expands beyond the outer structure, the result is not breakdown. It is pressure. A pressure that most women misidentify as dissatisfaction. He called this the process of individuation, the psyche's drive toward wholeness, toward becoming who you actually are beneath the roles you have played. And he noted something critical. This drive does not weaken with age, it intensifies. The further you move from society's expectations, the louder it becomes. The tragedy is not that this happens. The tragedy is that most women interpret this signal as failure, as evidence that something is wrong with them, when it is actually evidence that something is finally right. There is a reason this feeling arrives when it does. It is not random. It is not neurological decline. It is not simply hormonal. It is architectural. For most of your adult life, you existed inside a structure of roles: mother, wife, caregiver, professional, community member, friend, daughter. Each role came with clear expectations, clear rewards, clear feedback loops. You knew what success looked like because someone else had defined it for you. And then, gradually or suddenly, those roles ended. The children grew up. The career concluded. The marriage changed or dissolved. The parents passed. And the structure that once held you upright simply fell away. What remains is you. But you, the actual you, the one behind all those roles, may be someone you have never properly met. Jung described this as the removal of the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to meet the demands of social life. It is necessary. And when the roles that required the persona disappear, the mask has nothing left to attach to. It falls. And the face beneath it blinks in the unfamiliar light. This is why the feeling arrives in your 60s and 70s. Not because something is ending, but because for the first time in decades, there is enough silence for you to hear what has always been trying to speak. The roles were never the problem. They served their purpose. The problem is that you became so identified with them that when they ended, you mistook their absence for your own emptiness. You are not empty. You are simply standing in an open field for the first time, and the horizon looks unfamiliar. But there is a deeper mechanism at work here. The smallness you feel did not arrive overnight. It accumulated. And understanding how it accumulated is the key to understanding why it feels so difficult to name. When you first stepped out of your active life, retirement, empty nest, whatever form the transition took, the relief was genuine. No schedules, no obligations, no performance. After decades of giving yourself to others, the sheer absence of demand felt like freedom. And for a time, it was. That rest period was necessary and earned. Your nervous system needed to decompress. Your identity needed space to breathe. But here is what happens next. And this is the part no one warns you about. Rest becomes routine. Routine becomes inertia. Inertia becomes identity. The couch that once represented recovery begins to represent your entire world. The freedom that once liberated you begins to confine you. Because freedom without purpose is just another kind of cage. Jung understood this. He wrote that the psyche requires both rest and challenge. Without challenge, the personality does not simply stay the same. It contracts. It shrinks to fit whatever container it finds itself in. Your world got smaller, not because you chose smallness, but because comfort has a gravitational pull that operates below conscious awareness. And here is the most painful part. You may have participated in this shrinking without realizing it. Every time you said no to an invitation because it required effort. Every time you dismissed a new interest because it felt too late. Every time you told yourself that peace meant doing nothing. You were drawing the walls a little closer. You were not choosing peace. You were choosing safety. And those are not the same thing. There is something I want you to do right now. Before we go further into the 6 recognition patterns themselves, I want you to tell me in the comments, when did you first feel it? That quiet pressure, that sense that your life had become a well-organized room with no windows. You may not have had words for it then. You may not have words for it now. But there was a moment, a morning, an afternoon, a Sunday evening, when you looked at the shape of your days and something inside you said, this is not enough anymore. Write that moment below. You do not need to explain it fully. You do not need to justify it. Just name it. Because naming it is already the first crack in the wall, the first admission that your soul has been trying to tell you something that your mind has been too polite to hear. And if this is the kind of understanding you want to keep building, subscribe. What comes next goes deeper into the specific ways this outgrowing announces itself. Now, the 6 ways. 6 quiet signals that a woman's inner life has outgrown her outer one. These are not dramatic signs. They are subtle. They operate at the level of feeling rather than thought. And they often arrive disguised as irritability, as pickiness, as being difficult. The first signal is sudden intolerance, not anger, intolerance. Things you once handled gracefully now exhaust you. Surface-level conversations. Obligations that serve no real purpose. Social rituals that require you to perform a version of yourself you no longer believe in. You find yourself pulling away from people you have known for decades not because you dislike them, but because the space between who you are becoming and who they expect you to be has grown too wide to bridge with small talk. Jung called this, as the psyche matures, it stops investing energy in things that do not serve its deepening. The social masks that once felt effortless now feel suffocating. The phone calls you once made out of duty now feel like performances you can no longer sustain. This is not antisocial behavior. This is the soul's quality control system activating. It is saying, your energy is finite now. Spend it only on what is real. The second signal is a specific kind of hunger. Not for food, not for entertainment, not for distraction, but for depth. You begin to crave conversations that go somewhere, experiences that leave a mark, connections that require vulnerability rather than politeness. You may find yourself drawn to subjects you never explored before: philosophy, spirituality, art, psychology. Not as hobbies, but as necessities. Something in you is reaching for meaning the way a plant reaches for light. And alongside this hunger, you notice something uncomfortable. Comfort itself begins to feel suspicious. The routines that once soothed you now bore you. The predictability that once calmed you now confines you. You begin to sense, perhaps for the first time, that comfort and growth occupy different ends of the same spectrum. Jung wrote, when the psyche has capacities that remain unexpressed, it does not simply accept their absence. It protests through boredom, through restlessness, through a persistent dissatisfaction that cannot be solved by acquiring more of what you already have. The hunger you feel is not greed. It is your unused potential announcing its presence. The third signal is perhaps the most disorienting. It is the sudden awareness that you have been living on autopilot, and you do not know when it started. You wake up on a Tuesday and realize that this Tuesday is identical to last Tuesday, and the Tuesday before that, and the one before that. The meals are the same. The television shows are the same. The conversations are the same, and none of it is bad, but none of it is alive. This is what Jung described as the danger of unconscious living. The psyche can operate on automatic for years without the conscious mind noticing. Patterns repeat, days blur together, and the woman inside, the one with desires, with curiosity, with untapped creative force, the moment you notice the autopilot, the moment you feel disturbed by it, that is not the problem beginning. That is consciousness returning. The alarm has sounded. And the fact that it disturbs you means the part of you that wants to be awake is still functioning. You have not lost yourself. You simply went to sleep inside a routine that never asked you to stay awake. The fourth signal is subtler and more painful than the others. It is the realization that you are waiting for permission that will never come. Permission to change. Permission to want something different. Permission to admit that the life you built, the life others admire, the life you yourself chose, is no longer the life that fits. You wait for your children to say it is acceptable. You wait for your partner to encourage it. You wait for a friend to validate it. You wait for some external authority, a doctor, a therapist, a book, a sign from the universe, to tell you that what you feel is legitimate. But Jung observed something crucial about the individuation process in the second half of life. The permission never arrives from outside. It cannot. Because the people around you, even those who love you, have a vested interest in your stability. Your consistency serves them. Your predictability comforts them. This is not malice on their part. It is simply the nature of systems. Every system resists change in its components. Your family, your friendships, your community, they are systems. And systems do not grant permission for their own disruption. The permission must come from within. And that is terrifying, because you may have spent your entire life sourcing approval externally. The fifth signal may be the most confusing of all. It is grief. But grief for something that has not died. Grief for a life that is still technically present. You look at your marriage, your home, your friendships, your daily structure, and you feel loss. Not because these things are gone, but because your relationship to them has changed. The meaning they once carried has thinned. The identity they once provided has dissolved. They exist, but they no longer hold you the way they used to. This is what psychologists call ambiguous grief. Loss without a clear object, mourning without a funeral. And it is profoundly isolating because no one around you understands what you are mourning. Jung would say you are not grieving the life itself. You are grieving the self that once fit inside it. The younger woman who found these things fulfilling. The version of you who did not yet know she would outgrow the very things she most wanted. That grief is real. Honor it. It is not ingratitude. It is the emotional cost of growth. And growth does not come free. The sixth signal lives in the body. Before the mind names it, before the emotions clarify it, the body already knows. You may find yourself unable to sleep, not from anxiety, from activation. Something inside is energized, even when your schedule gives it nothing to be energized about. Or you may feel a heaviness, a physical weight that arrives without medical explanation. The doctor says you are fine. The blood work is normal. But your body feels dense, sluggish, as though it is carrying something that does not belong to it. Jung was deeply attentive to the body's role in individuation. He believed that unlived life does not simply disappear, it somatizes. It becomes tension, fatigue, restlessness, insomnia. The body becomes the messenger when the conscious mind refuses to listen. It is speaking to you. The insomnia, the restlessness, the unexplained fatigue, these are not symptoms of decline. They are symptoms of a life that is asking to expand while the structure around it remains fixed. The body knows first. It always has. And right now, it is telling you, there is more of you than this container allows. Now that you can see the 6 signals, the intolerance, the hunger for depth, the autopilot awareness, the permission paralysis, the ambiguous grief, the body's knowing, a larger pattern emerges. These are not 6 separate problems. They are 6 faces of a single process. Jung called this process individuation, the psyche's movement toward wholeness. But he made a distinction that most people miss. Individuation in the first half of life is about building identity, building competence, building a place in the world. Individuation in the second half of life is about unbuilding, releasing what no longer serves, dismantling the structures that once protected you but now confine you. This is not destruction. It is archaeology. You are not tearing yourself apart. You are carefully removing the layers of accumulated expectation to find what has always been underneath. And here is what makes women in this culture were trained implicitly and explicitly to define themselves through relationship, through service, through care, the roles of mother, wife, caregiver. These were not simply jobs. They were identities. They were the answer to the question, who am I? When those roles end or diminish, the question returns. But now, with decades of accumulated self behind it, who am I when no one needs me to be anything? Who am I when the only person I'm required to serve is myself? These are not small questions. They are the largest questions a human being can face. And facing them in your 60s or 70s does not make you late. It makes you ready. Because only now, stripped of the noise, freed from the performance, do you have the silence required to actually hear the answer. Jung's concept of the persona is essential here. The persona is not who you are. It is who you present to the world in order to function within it. It is the professional self, the maternal self, the social self, the curated version that others recognize and respond to. For decades, the persona served you well. It protected your inner life from the demands of the outer world. It allowed you to meet expectations without sacrificing everything inside you. It was a necessary compromise. But the persona has a dangerous quality. Wear it long enough and you forget it is a mask. You begin to believe that the persona is you, that the performing self is the real self. And when the performance ends, when retirement arrives, when the children leave, when the social roles dissolve, you experience something terrifying. You feel as though you have disappeared, but you have not disappeared. The mask has fallen, and what remains is not emptiness. It is the self you never had permission to become. The self that was always there, waiting patiently behind every role you played. This is the moment Jung considered sacred. He called it the confrontation with the self, capital S, not the ego, not the persona, not the social identity, the self, the totality of who you are, including everything you have never expressed, never explored, never allowed. Meeting this self is both liberation and terror, because it asks you to become someone you have never been, and to do so without a script, without a model, without anyone else's approval. There is another Jungian concept that becomes critical in this transition. The shadow. The parts of yourself that you rejected, suppressed, or denied in order to fit the roles that were expected of you. Every woman who has lived a life of service carries a shadow. It contains the selfishness she was never allowed to express, the ambition she was told was unfeminine, the anger she swallowed to keep the peace, the creativity she set aside because there was no time, the wildness she domesticated in exchange for belonging. At 65, at 70, the shadow does not weaken. It intensifies. It has been waiting, and it begins to surface, not as pathology, but as possibility. The sudden desire to dress differently, the unexpected interest in travel, the urge to say no without explanation, the fantasy of radical honesty, the quiet rebellion against being convenient. These are not symptoms of crisis. They are the shadow's materials. The unlived. Jung wrote that in the second half of life, the shadow is not the enemy. It is the ally. It contains exactly what is needed for the next chapter. The parts of yourself you rejected at 20 are often the parts you most need at 70. If you feel something just shifted in you, if you recognize yourself in that description, I puts this in front of another woman who is sitting alone tonight, wondering if she is the only one who feels this way. The invitation of the shadow is this: you do not need to become someone new. You need to become someone you always were, but never had permission to be. There is a particular trap that operates in the transition years. It looks like peace. It feels like rest, but it functions as a cage, and its name is comfort. After decades of effort, decades of meeting demands, solving problems, giving yourself away, the absence of challenge feels like paradise. And for a time, it is. The first months, even the first year of unstructured rest, can be genuinely healing. But comfort has a quality that Jung would have recognized immediately. It is entropic. It moves toward stillness, toward repetition, toward the lowest energy state. Left unchecked, comfort does not maintain you. It diminishes you. Your world contracts to fit the size of your routine. Your ambitions shrink to fit the shape of your couch. Your identity reduces to fit the expectations of whoever still sees you. This is not laziness. Without some form of tension, creative tension, relational tension, the productive discomfort of growth, the psyche contracts. It is designed to expand under challenge and shrink under ease. And so the great irony becomes visible. The rest you earned, the peace you deserved, the comfort you spent decades working toward, these are exactly what threaten to keep you small, unless you recognize them for what they are. A resting point, not a destination. Now comes the question that sits beneath all 6 signals. The question that makes women hesitate at the threshold of their own expansion. It is not whether you can change, it is whether you are allowed to. This fear has deep roots. For decades, your identity was relational. You were someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's employee, someone's caregiver. You existed in relationship to others' needs. And that relational identity came with an unspoken contract. You are valuable because you are useful. You are worthy because you serve. When you begin to grow beyond those roles, when you begin to want things for yourself alone, the old contract screams that you are selfish, that you are abandoning people, that wanting more means you are ungrateful for what you have. But Jung was very clear on this point. The individuation process in the second half of life, he wrote that the person who does not grow in the second half of life does not simply stay the same. They begin to decline. Psychologically, spiritually, even physically. The unlived life does not wait patiently. It turns toxic. It becomes bitterness, depression, rigidity, resentment. Growing is not a luxury. It is maintenance. It is what keeps you alive in ways that a heartbeat alone cannot provide. And here is what most people misunderstand about this kind of growth. They imagine it requires explosions, divorce, selling the house, moving across the country, some grand dramatic gesture that announces to the world, I am different now. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the container is so rigid that only a rupture can free what is inside. But far more often, especially in the second half of life, growth looks like expansion, not explosion. It looks like adding, not destroying. And it might look like signing up for a class in something that has nothing to do with your former identity, pottery, philosophy, dance. Something with no utility, no product, no audience, done purely for the experience of it. And it might look like one honest conversation, telling someone the truth about what you need, perhaps for the first time in years. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. One boundary set, one need named, one honest sentence spoken. And it might look like solitude, chosen rather than endured. A morning spent walking without destination. An afternoon spent with your own thoughts rather than filling silence with noise. The radical act of being alone and finding that you are not lonely, that you are, in fact, interesting company. Jung did not prescribe dramatic reinventions. He prescribed attention. He said, listen to what is trying to emerge, give it space, give it time, do not force it into shape. Let it reveal its own form. The growth your soul is asking for may be enormous, or it may be tiny, and still revolutionary. Both are valid. Both count. So what do you actually do with this understanding? How do you begin to expand a life that has grown too small without burning it to the ground? The first practice is radical honesty with yourself. Not honesty with others. That can come later. Honesty with yourself. This means sitting with the question, what do I actually want? Not what should I want? Not what would be reasonable to want? Not what others would approve of me wanting? What do I actually privately, secretly want? Write it down. Do not edit. Do not judge. Do not assess feasibility. Just name it. Because the naming itself is an act of rebellion against the decades you spent asking everyone else what they wanted and forgetting to ask yourself. Jung called this active imagination, the practice of letting the in its simplest form, it is just this: a blank page, an honest question, and the willingness to receive whatever answer arrives. The second practice is deliberate discomfort, chosen, not imposed. This does not mean suffering. It means doing one thing each week that your contracted self would avoid. One conversation you have been postponing, one place you have not visited, one activity that requires you to be a beginner again. The psyche grows through challenge, the way muscle grows through resistance. Without some friction, some encounter with the unfamiliar, expansion cannot occur. You do not need to climb mountains. You need to do one thing that makes you feel slightly alive where yesterday you felt numb. The third practice is the hardest. It is the practice of tolerating lostness. When you begin to expand beyond your current life, there will be a period, it might last weeks, it might last months, where you do not know who you are becoming. The old identity has loosened. The new one has not yet solidified. And the space between is uncomfortable. Do not rush to fill this space. Do not grab the first new identity that presents itself. The lostness is not a problem to solve. It is a process to trust. Jung called it the nigredo, the dark period of transformation where the old self dissolves before the new self crystallizes. It is messy, it is frightening, and it is absolutely necessary. Hold the lostness, carry it gently. It is not confusion, it is the raw material of becoming. Remember where we started. You looked at your life and thought, I chose all this. I wanted all this. So why does it feel so small? Now you know, it feels small because you are no longer the woman who chose it. You have grown. Quietly, invisibly, beneath the surface of your routines, you have become someone larger than the life you built for a younger version of yourself. That is not failure. That is not ingratitude. That is life working exactly as it was designed to work. The seed does not apologize for outgrowing its shell. The butterfly does not ask permission to leave the cocoon, and you do not need permission to become who you are. The 6 signals, the intolerance, the hunger, the autopilot awareness, the permission paralysis, the grief, the body knowing. They were never warnings of collapse. They were always invitations to expansion. Your life is not too small because you failed. Your life is too small because you succeeded at growing into someone it can no longer contain. No one is coming to rescue you from your own comfort. No one is coming to give you permission. No one is coming to say, you have earned the right to want more. You have to say it to yourself. Today. Right now. In whatever quiet room you are sitting in, with whatever life you have built around you, you are allowed to change. You are allowed to want. You are allowed to become someone you have never been before, at 65, at 70, at 75, at 80. As long as there is breath in your body, there is more of you waiting to emerge. The life you built was beautiful. It served its purpose. It held you when you needed holding. But you are no longer the woman. You are someone new. Someone larger. Someone whose soul has already begun reaching for what comes next. Trust that reaching. Follow it, even when it makes no logical sense, even when it frightens you, even when no one else understands. Your soul always knew before your mind did, and right now, it is telling you something important. Listen, the first practice is deceptively simple, and because it is simple, most women will skip it. Do not skip it. Sit with a single question, not, what do I want? That question is too large, too abstract, too terrifying for a woman who has spent decades answering it on behalf of others. The question is smaller, more precise, more honest. What has gone quiet in me that used to be loud? There was a time, maybe you were 19, maybe 32, maybe 45, when something inside you burned, a desire, a curiosity, a pull towards something that felt alive. And then life happened. Roles happened, obligations happened, and that burning thing did not die. It just went underground. Your practice is to name it. Write it down. Not in a journal with prompts and affirmations, just on a piece of paper. One sentence. What went quiet? When it went quiet, and whether it still pulses when you are honest enough to check. The part of the psyche that was sacrificed for adaptation, for survival within a role. It did not disappear. It simply waited. And now, in this season of your life, where the old roles have dissolved, it is waiting to be retrieved. Name it. That is all. You do not have to act on it today. But you must stop pretending you do not know it is there. The second practice requires more courage, because it asks you to stop investing energy in things that have already ended, even when those things still exist in your daily life. There are conversations you are still having that ended years ago. Friendships you are maintaining out of loyalty rather than life. Routines that serve no one, not even you, but continue because stopping them would mean admitting they no longer matter. Your practice is this. Choose one, just one. A commitment that has expired, but you keep showing up for. A relationship where the connection is maintained by your effort alone. A habit that once comforted you but now numbs you. And withdraw. Not with anger. Not withdraw. Simply stop pouring your energy into a container that is already cracked open at the bottom. This is not abandonment. This is recognition. You are not leaving anyone behind. You are simply acknowledging that you cannot grow into what is next while spending all your energy maintaining what is over. The energy you reclaim is the energy your next self needs to emerge. If you want to continue this work, if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of who you are becoming rather than who you were told to be, subscribe. What comes next is not lighter. It goes further, into the shadow, into the self, into the parts of your life that are still waiting for you to have the courage to look at them honestly. This is what we do here. Every video, every week, the next layer, the next question, the next version of yourself that you have been avoiding. Not because you are weak, but because you were not ready until now. You were never too small. You were always too much. Too much for the life you had been given. And now you know it. That knowing is not the end. It is the first breath of everything that comes next. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.